is rather than focusing on like what your spouse has maybe said or done that hurts you, is to focus on what are some healthy boundaries we can have in our relationship about how we communicate with one another.
First of all, we can't expect our spouse to be Jesus and meet all our needs, especially if we've wounded them.
As I move in my journey, like even in my health, I still have unhealth. So even in my health, I can still hurt people.
The XYZ kind of approach that says in situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z.
Maybe we need to take that hurt and process it outside of the relationship.
Hello there, good listener. I am your host, Nick Stumbo, and you are listening to the Pure Desire Podcast, your biblically based and clinically informed approach to healing from betrayal and breaking free from all forms of compulsive sexual behavior. And whether today is your first day in recovery or your 10,000th, we hope that it's a helpful conversation to hear a discussion that you might not have gotten to hear in other places in your life. Today is episode 452, and joining me as my co-host throughout this series is the one and only Mr. Stuart Blade. Stuart, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. It is exciting to be back, that is for sure.
Yeah, well, we're having a lot of fun in this series. This is part 3 of 5 in a series we're doing called Avoiding Relapse in Later Recovery. And it came really from the heart of our founder, Dr. Ted Roberts, who would work with men in recovery, and then he would find some of them coming back after a few years, having done really well, and then they had fallen back into a pattern of relapse or challenges, and there were some commonalities that he had seen along the way, and so that's this 5-part series. And today, the topic that we're facing is not taking full responsibility for how we have wounded those we love. Thoughts from you, Stuart, on why this is a challenge and why this episode is so important?
Oh, well, it is my own story of just like where I'm at in my journey. And so I just think about the places where we find ourselves where when Ted said it's a 2 to 5 year journey, like at that 5-year mark, in 7 Pillars, we can read that and be like, oh, well, after 5 years, like I should be good.
Good to go.
Absolutely. And what we do not tell people is this is a 2 to life journey. This does not stop after 5 years. And Eileen's conversation is incredible. Her vulnerability, her insights, the way she shares her own stories. It's going to be a great episode.
Yeah, Eileen Fagan is our guest today. She's a member of our counseling team, and so she helps couples with this all the time. And I think what you'll hear so clearly from her is that she has lived it.
Yeah.
And she has experienced both sides of when someone is not taking full responsibility for how they've hurt others, and then what it looks like when someone does. And so I think we've all got a ton to learn from this, and listener, you're in for a real treat. Just a little bit about Eileen. Eileen Fagan, as I mentioned, is part of the Pure Desire clinical team. She is a licensed professional counselor and a certified sex addiction therapist through ITAP International. She enjoys listening to people's stories and helping them connect the dots between their life experiences, feelings, thoughts, and actions. She works mostly with clients who have experienced trauma. And since trauma affects the whole person, spirit, body, mind, emotion, will, and soul, Eileen provides a holistic approach to treatment. And so here is our conversation with Eileen Fagan on not taking full responsibility for how we have wounded those we love. Eileen Fagan, welcome back to the Pure Desire Podcast. So good to see you again.
It's lovely to be here.
Yes, our fellow Tennessean, a resident of the great state of Tennessee. We were just commenting that 2 of us are here in the Portland studio, but you're back in Tennessee, and it's great to have you on again.
I am holding down the proverbial fort here.
We appreciate it, yeah. Well, we're in the middle of this series of identifying what might trip someone up, even after they've done some significant recovery, like what prevents them from making this a new way of life. And I think today's topic is a vital one because of how impactful it can be in our relationships. And so let's jump in. What does it mean when we say that someone is not taking full responsibility for how they have wounded those they love? And why do you think this might contribute to a later pattern of relapse?
Yeah, when I think of somebody not taking full responsibility, I think we see a cluster of symptoms. And when I see these, and when Bill and I in our work with couples, when we see these clusters of symptoms, when they're just trying to connect, but they're staying disconnected, it almost always points to what I call undigested trauma. It points back to a wound a lot of times. And it may be that the struggling spouse isn't even aware of it, but they're certainly feeling the symptoms of it. And it's painful. And so it's painful for the betrayed spouse too. The defensiveness, maybe some isolation, minimizing, all of those things are part of not taking full responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just do a swap of the word responsibility with ownership, and there's so much there for that word. Like, it just personally resonates with me. That would be like words out of my mouth or words out of my wife's mouth would be like, I need you to take ownership here. And that is hard. If you've not had to do that in the past, like that muscle had not grown for me. And so here I am exercising something that I honestly hadn't done, and coming to the table, taking ownership, like just naming it. Like, these were all very new things that I had to develop in this journey. And that's a super skill in order to do that. And we're trying, like, not only in addiction, but just as parents, like, we're trying to do that with our kids, like, just help them identify, take ownership. And like, as you're talking about the old wounds, like, if we can teach our kids young not to, like, this doesn't define you. It doesn't, I think define is work. Great. It doesn't define you. But if you can take ownership for the mistake, like, we can move past that in a beautiful way. But those are just some tools that I had to learn as an adult.
Well, right. And if you think about it, it's a learned response. Minimizing and defensiveness is a learned response. If I went up to you, Stuart, and I cocked back like I was going to punch you, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to defend. If I did the same thing to my 2-year-old grandson, he's not going to defend himself because I've never wounded him.
Yeah.
So that's a natural response. And so just as in the physical, that happens in the emotional too. When there's been a wound, we have a defense.
So just to check, are you saying that you've punched Stuart before, or was that just a metaphor?
Many times.
This is why we had to come out to Portland to record
I didn't
this.
realize there was a history there. You know what I think of, this goes to what you were saying, Eileen, that when we're doing that, when we're not taking full responsibility, it's often because we're trying to avoid the pain that comes with that. Because if I fully recognize the pain I've caused, how I've hurt people, that's hard. And it's human nature to not want to have to sit in pain. And so we may be, whether intentionally or unintentionally, kind of avoiding going to that place because we don't want to feel the pain. But ironically, that is the very thing that contributes to patterns of relapse, because generally relapses are rooted in some kind of pain avoidance. Now, that doesn't mean specifically about how we've hurt people, but just in life, that we're not dealing with something we need to deal with. Instead, we're looking for an escape or an outlet or something to soothe or comfort us. And in that pain avoidance pattern, we continue to relapse. And so I think if we can see it for that it's not just blame shifting or, a lack of communication, that at a root level, there's a part of me that wants to avoid pain, and that's normal. Like, that's okay, but that's what we need to do. We need to face the pain.
Yeah.
Right. It's built into it. It's part of the way God created us.
Yeah.
And so when we're wounded, and this is what Michael Dye says in the Genesis process, the best defense is to create a wall. And so in recovery, we learn to break down that wall and to develop some stress tolerance around the pain. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And so, in our work with couples, we really try, and sometimes Bill and I'll switch roles, and I'll be the advocate for the struggling spouse, and I'll say, we'll get into how hard they've worked and how hard it's been, and I'll get into some of the stories from family of origin and how it must have hurt, and it's changing. It's life changing.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Eileen, you mentioned them as symptoms, but we'll call them signs or hallmarks. So what are some of the signs or hallmarks that we might be doing this? Like, having those experiences?
Yeah. I think defensiveness is a big one.
Okay.
We talked about that physical defensiveness. Well, emotional defensiveness it looks like, it can look like contempt. It can look like minimizing. It can look like blame shifting. Defense is a big one because a lot of times the struggling spouse feels that they have nobody else who's going to have their back, because they know there's this guilt, there's this shame that they've wounded their spouse. And so they feel like, and Bill has said this in his own recovery, there's nobody else here to defend me. I've got to do it myself. So we see a lot of that.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a story we tell. And it might be too early for this story, so we might have to move it. But we call this story the cabinet story. And this was a time when we were still in our house in Oregon, and we were having a cabinet moved because we were getting a new washer and dryer, and it was in the way. So we had to empty out this cabinet. So I thought I'd surprise him. I got done working earlier than he did. So my daughter and I got in there. We cleaned out this whole cabinet, moved everything out of the way. Well, he came down just as we'd finished. And he had a question that he wanted to ask me. And then he looked up and he goes, oh, yeah, we've got to empty that cabinet. And so I did this lovely flourish. I opened up the cabinet. I went, you mean this cabinet? And it was all empty. And he went, oh, yeah, okay. And blah, 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 blah. And he went on with what he said. Well, you can probably see where the problem lay for me, that it was kind of oh, all right, okay. And so I let it go. We had dinner. He finished working. We were sitting out on our porch. And I was faced with a choice, because I sort of knew what I was going to get if I brought it up, that I was disappointed in his reaction. But I had to take the risk. So we sat outside, and I said, I felt disappointed at your reaction to the cabinet. And then I waited, and I can remember my gut feeling tight. And he said, and this was very different, because what I was expecting was what I had gotten in the past, which was defensiveness. I was working. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what you expected of me. Things like that. To defend himself. He said, give me a minute. And he waited, and I waited, and it probably wasn't more than 30 seconds, but he turned to me and he said, that must have felt really awful. I'm so sorry. And I went, what just happened? That's what I'm thinking. But what happened inside of me was any upset or anger or anything I felt had completely washed away.
Yeah.
By that response. And that was a changing moment. That was a changing of his old neural pathway, because he chose a different route. So he chose something different to do. And that really changed the trajectory of our conversations and his ability to be empathetic instead of defensive.
Yeah.
And his brain learned that that was the better way.
Yeah, that's really beautiful to think about, taking a pause, collecting our thoughts, breathing deeply, and then being able to take ownership and acknowledge, and the way that so often does lead to fruitful conversations versus the opposite when we are defensive or deflecting. Like it like snowballs from bad to worse. And I think that's a great example. A couple of the signs that come to mind for me when we're not taking full responsibility is when we're quick to change the subject, that as soon as our loved one starts to veer towards how we've hurt them, we're like, look over there, look, I just don't want to go there because we feel the pain. That's a sign. To add to that, we just don't talk about it at all. Like, we work hard to never bring it up. And some of that can be semi-healthy, like, well, the past is in the past. We don't want to just dig up the past for the point of digging up the past. But like, if we realize we're conscientiously trying not to ever go there again, there's probably something we're avoiding. Or the third thing that comes to mind that would show we're not taking full responsibility is when any time the pain or that challenge comes up, we're quick to explain it away. Well, that's because this happened and that happened. And we do an explanation without first taking, just what Bill did in your story, without first taking ownership and acknowledging the pain. Because there are many times an explanation of what happened can be a fruitful part of the conversation between a couple, of someone saying like, hey, help me understand why you reacted that way. And we talk through it, which is an effort to explain what happened. But if we realize in conversations with our spouse, all we're ever doing is trying to explain away what we did without that pause of, I need to own that I've hurt you. I want to acknowledge your pain. I see what this did to you. And in that moment, here's what was happening in me. So I do explain maybe what I was going through, but it always should be preceded with that ownership. And so those are a couple of the things I feel could be a hallmark or a sign that we're not taking full responsibility for our actions.
Yeah. First, I want to give Bill a high five, because like that was an incredible moment. And what I love about that story is it's in those, and I don't want to minimize this as a small story, like a small part of the story, but like when I think about the harm I've caused my wife, a cabinet is on the very low side of things, of not recognizing that. But it is in those little moments that we can start to build what we can start doing in the more painful parts of our story. And so like those are the building blocks. Like if the shame level is so great of like going to that point of like naming the greatest offense that I've caused you, if that one's too much, then start at the small things. Like what are the little ones that we can do? And then I don't have much to add on. Defensiveness, blaming, comparison, justifying, avoiding, condemning, minimizing, like all of those, we just need to become aware. And like, again, high five, Bill, take 30 seconds. And what is it I want to do in this moment? Like, what would have been my past, how I would have responded from this? Okay, let's do it differently. And then what does that look like? What does ownership look like?
Right. That's what we call a corrective emotional experience. So to change that old neural pathway from those symptoms, I'll say, to doing something different, like Bill did that day, that starts a new neural pathway. With all those kind of corrective experiences, you can change the brain from being in that place of, I need to defend, to I need to come alongside.
Yeah.
Because we're on the same side. We both want connection. And how do we get there?
Yeah.
So defensiveness, I think, is such a big part of this. I want to lean into that a little more. And it feels in some ways like the challenge to take ownership, to get defensive is human nature, even if we might say it's human fallen nature. Why is defensiveness such a common go-to? And if we realize that's our go-to, what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate legacy of trauma, because trauma turns people inward. It puts them in a self-protect mode. So think about when you're a child, if you're in a family where there's trauma, there's chaos, there's the power differential is huge when you're a child. And if those adults are doing a less than stellar job of being a parent and protecting the child has to become self-centered and figure out, how am I going to take care of me? And so that starts a progression of I need to protect me. And that's, we use terms like hypervigilance. That's what hypervigilance is. It's watching out my surroundings at all times to make sure I'm going to be okay. So I think it starts there. It's human nature. I think fallen nature, it's the sin legacy. Yes, we've sinned, but we've also been sinned against. And those are that's the fallout from that. So if people aren't protecting us, we have to protect ourselves. So defensiveness feels very natural and very that's the logical step.
Amen.
So getting people out of that trauma brain and on the same side as the spouse is hard.
It is. And testify, it takes work. There at some point came a shift for me to realize responsibility and condemnation are like two pathways. And so as I leaned into responsibility, and I mean, it could be anything, like responding to my wife, and my response may have been better than what it was, but then she'd be like, but your tone. And then it'd be like, well, great. Now I have to, not only do I have to say the right things, now I have to say it the right way. But those were the subtle shifts. Like, okay, now I say the right thing, but like, how does my face look? How is my tone? Am I truly apologizing? Or is it like, I mean, like, I wish this would be a story about my kids, but like, I'm sorry. And it like, less robotic, Stuart, less robotic. Like, what does it look like to actually just experience it and allow it to just say, yeah, that was a really horrible way in which my tone was message, like the message was we're making baby steps, we're improving, but there's still work to go. And just to not receive that as a condemnation message, but a responsibility message, and to have a moment where it's like high five myself, like, hey, at least we said something in the right direction. There's other parts to work on. We can do that.
Of course. And you put your hand on your heart. You know, I think there has to be a shift from the head to the heart.
Yeah.
Because that's where the rationalizing comes in. We can be real cognitive. And that's why I used to say that to Bill, I could have cognitive Bill or I could have heart Bill. And cognitive Bill will explain and make everything sound so smart. And you can hear his 3 master's degrees coming out. And I'll say, I don't want teacher Bill. I want heart Bill.
Yeah.
It's important, too, to recognize the story that we're telling ourselves when defensiveness happens, because in some ways, defensiveness is like anxiety. And I heard Dr. Kurt Thompson speak on anxiety, and it was so incredible because he made this point that, like, sometimes we treat the human like they're just heads on a stick and like, oh, you're feeling anxiety. Let's give you a pill for that. Let's deal with your anxiety. But he said, you know, we're connected human beings, and that anxiety is coming from somewhere, and it's a story that we're telling ourselves, usually based around worst case scenarios. That anxiety says, I'm anxious about this because if this happens, then that will happen, and then that will happen. And ultimately, the end of the story for anxiety is, and I will be all alone. And so what's making me anxious is in the present moment, something is triggering that cascading worst case story of I end up all alone. And I think defensiveness is similar in that I am needing to protect something because I'm telling myself a story that says, well, and if this plays itself out, then I will be alone or no one will love me. And if we don't have an awareness of a story we're telling ourselves, then of course we're going to get defensive because like you said, the best way to be safe is build a wall. Like it's natural to not want to be alone or to be rejected. So get defensive to try to keep that from happening. And yet, ironically, when we don't see it happening, we tend to create the very environment that we fear. That in being defensive, we are pushing people away. In being defensive, we are creating isolation. We're creating the very thing we're trying to avoid. So if we can see that, if we can see what's happening and see the bigger story that we're believing, then I think we can start to pull out of it and go, okay, that's not what's at stake here, because I do have people that will defend me. You know, the Lord is on my side. I've got a group I can go to. I've got, you know, a mentor, a friend that I can process with, and ultimately believing the good-hearted nature of my spouse, that they want to be on my side as well. In the case where a marriage is, you know, working on recovery, if we can see some of those positive messages, then I think we can bring down the defense reaction and be present in the moment for what's happening.
Yeah. I just want to circle back to this. We build the walls for a reason. And so like as we are in that, like that is a courageous thing to breach the wall, that to allow other people to like have that, to be fully seen and known. Those are courageous and really vulnerable things. And that's not easy work. Like it's not just, oh, just tear down the wall. Like, no, this is really hard work. And so I think it's important just to honor that. Like what you're doing is really courageous in that aspect as well.
Absolutely. Because what are the messages you got in that dysfunctional, chaotic family of origin?
Yeah.
You know, what is it? What were the things that you were believing?
Yeah. And maybe take time just to thank the wall. Like, what did the wall do to protect you, to have those moments? Eileen, if we've been in recovery for a while and feel that our spouse or a group member isn't taking full ownership, what can we say or do to help them come to this realization?
Yeah. Yeah, we touched a little bit on it. I think we have to make that shift to out of that protective, self-centered, trauma brain to, I wonder how my spouse is seeing this from their perspective.
Mm.
So we encourage people to ask questions.
Yeah.
And to hold back the defensiveness and try to get around it and ask some more questions. Help me understand why what I said hurt you. I want to know what that was like for you.
Mm.
I think that's one of the best ways is to get people to be free. I think is the best way I can say it, is to be free from those, to be chained to those coping behaviors, those defense mechanisms, is to start asking questions.
Yeah.
Empathy is a hard one.
One of the tools that we've heard on the podcast that I think could help in this situation of how do I, graciously say a hard thing. And I think it was maybe Les Parrott that gave us the XYZ kind of approach that says, in situation X, when you do Y, I feel Z.
Yes.
And I think for a spouse to say that in terms of the emotional impact it's having on them, that can be a nice, clear formula. So to say, when I see you isolating on your phone, situation X, it makes me fearful that you're going back to old patterns, and I wonder if you're relapsing. So when you're Y, and when you respond by saying, "Oh, don't worry about it," that actually only makes me feel worse.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's a formula to say, like, do you recognize that your actions are creating this emotion for me? And hopefully at that point, they're open to talking about it. And I think even for a group member, you might be able to take that approach to say, hey, in situation X, when we're sharing our faster skills together, when you, Y, your response Y, when you never have ever gone down below forgetting priorities, it makes me feel that you're not really aware or willing to talk about what's going on at a deeper level. Do you think that might be true here? That because human nature, we don't just all live only in forgetting priorities. We're going to have tough weeks. So I'm wondering if there's more going on here. So I think that could be a formula to just share what you're observing and the impact it's having or what you see, and then giving them that opportunity to respond or take ownership appropriately.
Yeah. I'll lean into this. I love the response of the spouse. I'm gonna take this in the direction of the group member. Like if we're in a group and the group member, I think there's asking questions, and this is an area I'm really trying to grow in. Like advice giving, obviously, that just produces fight, flight, or freeze. So to interject and say this is what you should do, like we know that's why in our groups we say don't give advice, especially unsolicited advice. Like if somebody's asking, like, hey, help me in this, what would be a better way to respond? That is asked for. That is a different scenario. And coming with curiosity and questions. But one of the things that I'm wrestling with, and just I'm curious if a question or a statement. So I'm wrestling with this just as a group leader myself. And when I ask a question, sometimes that question can just activate that hatch in the brain that gets to where it's like, why is he asking me this question? And so there's a potential that might shut down because we're activating like the defenses to where it's like, oh, I'm getting asked a question. Like, do my defenses need to go up? And I've been instead trying to implement statements. So if somebody comes and let's say they're presenting their double bind, and in groups, I want people to come, give me the double bind where you failed. Don't give me the double bind where you like knocked it out of the park and like had a really great response. That's not going to help us. But if you bring the double bind and then I get an opportunity to just be like, wow, that was a really hard place to be. And I just let that statement linger. That is when you can really start to see some of the more like below the surface things start to approach, because I didn't activate that door. I didn't ask a question, and I just affirmed the difficulty of that. And like as a group leader, we get to like that opportunity. I want to say like that is not the responsibility of the spouse, but like that is something we get to experience in group. And as you, of course, being a clinician, like that's pivotal groundwork that we get to do in those moments, and it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, the white space, space, allowing some silence,
Mm,
often uncomfortable.
yes.
So slowing everything down. You know, we have to take into account if it starts, if one or both start feeling limbic, you might have to postpone.
Yeah.
You might have to postpone for a while and come back to it. Yeah, you know, the XYZ, getting back to that, you know, when this happened, I felt this. I add one. And my addition is I needed or I need.
Mm,
Because when sometimes we need to help our spouse that's struggling, when there's been a break in connection. Sometimes the phrase I'll use with Bill is, in a perfect world, in my
Mm,
perfect world, this is how you would have responded.
mm.
And I think that's really helpful, because
absolutely.
so have the, when this happened, I felt this, but sometimes adding that I need or I would have needed this.
Well, Eileen, I love what you're overcoming there is like mind reading is down on the faster scale. Like we don't want to lead our spouse into mind reading of what does she want? Like
Yes.
I confess I need it spoon fed sometimes to where it is like, okay, just tell me like how would it have been better like to have responded? Because I'm learning what better is and I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. How unkind would it be if
Mm,
I left my spouse hanging and said, well, you figure it out.
yeah.
Now that puts me in the victimizer role.
Mm,
Yeah. What I hear you saying, Eileen, is how important it is to have a mindset of growth, that we're training, we're developing, we're getting better at this. We're not expected to be perfect overnight, but we're growing in empathy and compassion and awareness. And so in that regard, want to really look at the positive side here. You've worked with so many, couples and individuals. When someone is getting this right, when they're taking full responsibility for how they've hurt others, but without going to that like scapegoat mode of like, woe is me, I'm terrible, I've hurt everyone, it's all my fault. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like a healthy awareness and responsibility. And so when someone is doing that, how are they getting it right? Like, what would you describe their words, actions, and attitudes like in that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, you're hearing the empathy. They're coming alongside their spouse instead of feeling like, when there's a break in connection, it feels like, like the two of you are right now, one's on one side of the desk and one's on the other.
mm,
What it sounds like is that they're both on the same side.
Mm.
I can see that. I see how that was really painful for you, just like the cabinet story.
mm-hmm.
I can see how that really hurt you. I missed you. I missed you in that. I missed being with you. I missed your feelings. You did this hard work, and I see that I overshadowed it, and you felt invisible. So it looks like coming alongside. And when you do that, like I said, in my experience, all the upset melted. And that was a little thing. So it's not always going to work that way. We might always get the response, but it's a consistency over time. It's not going to look perfect every time, but that starts to become the normal. So it's that bridging that gap between I have to, because I think sometimes the struggling spouse feels like I have to perform. I have to dot every I and cross every T to get it right. And it feels like jumping through. I've heard that so many times.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have to jump through hoops for her. I have to get it right all the time. You don't have to get it right all the time, but you can come alongside.
Yeah. I'll go personal for this one for myself. Like, what does it look like when taking full responsibility? Jenna Ramirez with like the firefighters, like the rage. That firefighter for me, when he got big and then my wife would leave the room, that firefighter was there like, just like, well, you're welcome. And just internally, I'm like, you idiot. You just took a 10-minute thing into a 2-hour thing. And just to like notice like who are those firefighters, where are they coming from? And that's a plug if you have not listened to IFS with Jenna Ramirez, but go back to previous episodes and go listen
Number
to
160.
those. Way to go. God, that's spot on. That was not scripted, everybody. Being able to identify and then do it differently, to come in and say, okay, I am going to stay in this room she is going to stay in this room. Both of us are going to have like what was very different than what we'd had in the past. Like, and just to have it be different than what it was for me, it was making eye contact with my wife, like staying present, actively listening, not having a posture of defensiveness as she's talking to me. Like I mean, I was a child. I was responding like a child. My arms would be crossed. My eyes would be rolling. I had not developed emotionally to be able to be in the room. And it was just developing those skills to eventually be a man that could stay in the room with my wife that was what my wife needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And in using IFS language, the firefighter, the rage, the anger, whatever that firefighter is, you appease, can stay in the room. They, hang in there. I'm going to try something different.
Oh, that's good.
Because if you try to just totally dismiss it and say, I don't need you anymore, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you say, okay, I see you, let's try something different. It gives you choice. It gives you agency.
That's
we're
awesome.
We're going to do something different.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard you say this, Eileen, but in these cases, what comes to mind for me is less talky, more walky. And I know in my 10 years of, half-baked confessions to my wife, there was a lot of talking where I was trying to explain, and here's why, you shouldn't be that mad, and this is what happened, and here's why it's not going to happen again. And I would talk and talk and talk to try to use my words to fix a situation. And I think a sign of someone taking full responsibility is that walking it out, like fewer words, of that, the ownership of, I relapsed, I viewed pornography, I did this, I'm sorry, and then a commitment that's lived out of it. And here's the changes I'm going to make to acknowledge the pain this causes, how it disrupts our relationship. Here's what I'm doing differently. And I'm not just going to tell you, I'm going to show you. Because I think that's the ultimate proof of ownership, is not just what I do with my words. It's do I live differently? That's the heart of repentance, metanoia. Do I change my thinking and behaving as a way of moving away from a decision or behavior, not just say I'm sorry and I'm really, really sorry and I really, really, really am sorry, and that shows you that I'm taking responsibility. It's like, well, no, that may just be a way of minimizing your pain, that if I can feel sorry enough, then I'll feel better. Taking responsibility and ownership means living differently, and that's something we have to walk out consistently.
Yeah, that's James, the book of James. All of you must be. He doesn't say you should be, or, be a good idea. He said, all of you must be slow to speak, slow to get angry,
yes,
and quick to listen. And that's in the same chapter where he talks about faith and taking steps. And that if you don't take a step, your faith is dead. So taking those small steps to do something different.
Amen.
I hear you rage, but I'm going to try empathy.
Yeah.
I hear you rage, but I'm going to try listening. It's all part of it.
Yeah.
The Gottmans have talked in their research on treating affairs and trauma. They talk about this concept. You probably heard it: atone, attune, attach. So atonement is the full disclosure, right? That's part of that we do. Attune is a much longer process. That's the longest part. Attunement is those trust building behaviors over time. The listening well, the empathy, the ownership, all of those things are part of those are the trust building behaviors that will grow trust and grow connection with your spouse over time.
Yeah.
But it does take time, and we have to be careful we're not growing weary in well-doing, because it's sometimes a long walk.
Yeah, I hear betrayal and beyond language and seven pillars language that talks about the sincerity, ability, and durability of how over time that is what's needed to build trust. Yeah.
What's coming up? Have you heard of bird theory? It's a viral thing right now in social media, bird theory.
Do tell.
So if you've seen some of the reels on this, is a spouse will say, I saw a bird today. And then they're waiting to see if that bid for connection, using Gottman terms, is met. And that where the spouse says, oh, really? What kind of bird was it? Or when did you see it? What did it look like? As opposed to nothing. Cricket. I saw a bird today, nothing. Or they changed the subject, and so it kind of reminds me of that. Is are we leaning into our spouse? Are we really listening well? Are we attuning to what they're saying?
Yeah.
I saw a bird is just this viral thing right now, but it's very much about, are we meeting our spouse's bids for connection? Are we recognizing them? So bids for connection are big, especially in recovery, because if we felt invisible or unseen or minimized, helping our spouse to be seen is really important.
Yeah. Well, note to self: if your wife asks you that or tells you that she saw a bird, you better pay
be
attention.
ready.
Lean in.
I think that would catch me so off guard. It's like, you've never been a bird person. Why are you saying that?
I'm looking forward to the stories that are going to come out of that one.
So, if Eileen, if we are the struggler, what do we do when we are also hurt by our spouse's words or actions? How do we avoid comparison or blame shifting?
Yeah, this is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
This comes up a lot. And a lot of times when we're the struggling spouse, we want to get that validation back from our spouse that don't you recognize the hard work I'm doing? And we want to have that connection. Sometimes we need to take that outside of the relationship. So we need to take that hurt to our group. We need to take that hurt to a counselor. Maybe it's time to engage in couples counseling if you haven't already. If there are times when we need an adjunct to group, maybe we need to involve a third party, a mediator, a pastor, a trusted friend, a group member. Maybe we need to take that hurt and process it outside of the relationship. Because we can't expect our spouse to be, first of all, we can't expect our spouse to be Jesus and meet all our needs. And we can't, especially if we've wounded them. So sometimes the best thing to do is to really process that. And how you would end that with your spouse is, I can see that my reactions have really, reason you're having these issues right now, I can see that this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the breach of trust that I've caused. And I'm going to take what you said to heart. I'm hurt. I do feel hurt, and I'm going to take it to heart, and I'm going to meditate and get some help on how I can make this right.
Yeah.
I can.
This is a really tricky situation because sometimes we can feel like if I've been the struggler, if I've hurt my spouse, I don't have a right to feelings. And we don't want to become just the doormat that's like, I have to absorb it no matter how it comes. But at the same time, if there are certain ways we react to our betrayed spouse's behavior, it can feel like blame shifting or defensiveness, or like, who are you to tell me what to do? And so that's a really challenging situation. I think in those cases, what can be helpful is, rather than focusing on like what your spouse has maybe said or done that hurts you, is to focus on what are some healthy boundaries we can have in our relationship about how we communicate with one another. And so to say, if your spouse has gone off on yelling at you and name calling because of a lot of hurt, you may need to start by saying, I can see that I've hurt you. I deeply regret the pain that I've caused. I know you're experiencing incredible hurt, and I'm validating that's all true. And I also want to express that when you call me names, it's very difficult for me to respond well to that. And so I'm wondering if we could try to create some boundaries in our communication that, there's not name calling, or we don't yell, we don't, use the kids as leverage, we don't go and vent to our in-laws, whatever the situations are that are causing legitimate pain. It's maybe expressing it more as, hey, what are some mutually agreed guardrails around our communication that would help both of us? And it's not just about you or me. It's about what creates the kind of conversations that lead to growth and not just division. So again, you want to be careful in how you do that. I'm not like, well, who are you to call me names? And they're like, well, who are you to object because you've hurt me? So if you're not acknowledging the pain first, that conversation is generally not going to go well. But at the same time, I would encourage you that it's okay to have feelings as well, and that your feelings may be hurt, and finding a way to express that. And it may not be, like you brought up, Eileen, it may not be directly to your spouse at first. You might need to go to a group member or your group leader or your counselor or friend and say, man, this happened. We were dealing with the pain I've caused, and all this got said back to me, and I'm really wounded. What do I do? Like, processing that with someone else first might be good. but then circling back and having that conversation when both of you are, you're not as elevated in your emotions and heart rate. You're able to have a more cordial conversation of like, hey, when we had that conversation, did I acknowledge your pain? Do you feel seen and heard? And I'm wondering if you're able to recognize the hurtfulness of some of the words you chose, because that caused pain for me. And I feel that I need to express that as well, even though I know that I'm the one that caused the pain we're in. So it's this dance between acknowledging their pain, but also realizing you're a human being that can be hurt too, and you don't have to just ignore that.
Yeah. My heart just goes to let this be a plug that healing is for both sides. And I think of our own story. Like, I got into 7 pillars years before my wife got into betrayal and beyond. And like, this question is us. I mean, it was us. Like, so as I'm doing work and I'm gaining traction and having momentum, like, there is power when both couples are doing the work, because that would have given my wife the space to process her pain and her hurt in a healthy place with all the ladies that are there in a betrayal and beyond group to validate those feelings that she's experiencing. And then for myself, like, then I have my people. Like, when I think of this in groups, it mostly comes out when, like, the struggler wants the spouse to see the progress that's been made. And I tell my group members, like, let us have those wins and we celebrate those with you. Bring those to the group and we will validate those. Don't have the expectation that your spouse is going to be your cheerleader in this moment, to just be like, I am so excited that you've gone a month without relapsing. Like, that is, I would say, an unrealistic expectation to think that will be celebrated in that moment. Like, let the group do that group work, or let the clinician do that affirming work, where that may not be, your spouse may not be ready for that response yet.
Right. At some point, you can have a safety plan or a recovery plan for the relationship, for the coupleship.
Yes.
At some point, where, it's okay, we're not going to curse each other. We're not going to walk away when one is talking. We're not going to go tell the neighborhood, what each of us has done. Having those guardrails for the coupleship. But until then, when we're still in the attunement, then we may have to get our affirmations outside of our spouse until they've healed more, because healing doesn't happen evenly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ever.
I know what was happening in our relationship is that my wife would say, I want you to feel the hurt that I'm feeling. And so whether it was with her words or even things she acknowledged, like, I was tempted to go and do X, Y, or Z to hurt you back because I wanted you to feel the pain I'm feeling. And so I would say to the struggler, the recovering addict, that's why it is so important that you deeply acknowledge their pain, because what they're looking for is, do you get it?
Yes.
Do you get how hurt I am? And if they don't think you get it, that desire to hurt back is probably there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't justify it. It doesn't make it okay for them to hurt back. But when you see the root of it, that might give you motive to go, man, I need to own this deeply. Otherwise, they're going to try to, in other ways, maybe create that pain. And what I say to the betrayed spouse is, it's like you're still holding the shovel. If you're trying to hold them back or hurt them back, you're still digging the hole deeper. And in some ways, it's like a relapse. Like, in the moment, it might feel good to call them all these names, or even to go have an affair and then like see how much that hurts. And in the moment, it worked, but the pain gets a whole lot worse later, and you're still digging the hole.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we try to say to spouses, both the betrayed and the struggler or addict, is lay the shovel down. The hole's already deep enough. Let's not make it worse. Let's work on constructive things that can rebuild. And some of that's going to be really hard work. But if we keep hurting back and forth, the hole's just getting deeper, and the work of recovery will be that much harder.
So empathy goes both ways. For the betrayed spouse, oftentimes, I told you, sometimes Bill and I switch roles, but we try to say, remember that you're not only dealing with the person that betrayed you, You're dealing with the 7-year-old who had to make meals for his siblings because the parents weren't around. You're
Yeah.
dealing with the 8-year-old.
It's getting intertwined with your trauma too.
Yeah.
Yes, right, right. So, eventually the empathy has to go both ways. We have to see both sides.
Yeah. I want to circle back to something we touched on a little bit, Eileen, but get your wisdom on this because I think it's a common experience, this challenge between taking full responsibility or wallowing in shame and continual self-condemnation. Like, this is all me, what a terrible person. Like, so how do we balance that or find that place of truthfulness about what we've done and the hurt we've caused while still having grace and kindness for ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah, so many times people get stuck in shame. Shame and fear are those two number one tricks of the enemy. Fear of being left, abandoned, rejected, and then the shame about what we've done. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to recognize that the shame is there, acknowledge that there's that pain, that there's that wound, and then um, and then balance that with self-kindness, and sometimes that takes prophetic promises. What is the Lord speaking to you? What's the lie that you've believed about yourself? Whether it's whatever I do won't be good enough. um, uh, uh, I can't trust anyone. Any of those kind of old lies. And what is Jesus saying to you? What is he telling you? If that's the lie, then what's the truth? And we have to know what the truth is. And then also have that compassion for that little one that lives inside of us, that wounded part of us. One of the exercises that we do with couples that's really helpful for this is we talk about, in Seven Pillars, they talk about, I think it's 10 worst moments. If you, as an adult, could go to the little you that was wounded, what would you say? What would you say to that part that was wounded? What kind of kindness could you speak into that? So, little self-disclosure here. When I was 7 years old, I remember exactly where I was. This is how wounds are, right? They're like full color memories that you have. So I'm on this playground, my favorite teacher, and I'm on the tetherball court. And she looks at me and she says, "You'd be so pretty if you just lost weight." 7 years old.
Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had this experience of, and with guidance, allowing my adult self to get down, and this is a tender spot, and this is how it's transformative though, is I took my adult self and I got down on a knee, so I was eye level with her, and this is all in my mind. I'm saying, she's not right. You are perfect just the way you are. God made you just the way he wanted to make you. And those aren't words of truth. You believe that you're perfect and you're wonderful and you're beautiful just the way you are. And you don't have to believe that. And you don't have to take that to heart.
Yeah.
That's self-kindness.
Yeah.
And we have to practice those things. And it is a practice.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It's hard to come after that. I think I'll just sit in the fact that, Eileen, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. Yeah, when I think about this question, it is when we say ownership, like that can go both ways. Like, do we own what we did or does what we did own us?
Yes.
And so just to like wrestle through that a little bit of like, what's the overall message? Is it, as you said, using the language from Pillars, is it the limbic lie that is owning us, or is it our Father's love that owns us? And I think the healing work from me came when I was going through counseling, and I think it was like you were processing with, I think you said 7-year-old you. I think mine was like somewhere around that same age, where introducing Jesus to that age, Jesus was scary and mean for 7-year-old me. And so as I was like going through, like my counselor was asking, like, are you ready to be introduced to Jesus? But 7-year-old me was like, no, like he's rude and hurtful and mean, but that was the presentation that had been given to me. And so my counselor then just invited me into this moment and said, hey, would 42-year-old you explain who Jesus is to you now to 7-year-old you? And to just see the beauty of that change, I think like that's where those limbic lies can be broken, because there is a false core belief of who our Father says we are that the enemy has used to lie and to steal and destroy, which is his motive. Like that is his game plan. And when we allow Jesus to just be able to be the transformation in those moments, it is so impactful. I love that for you with your story of just having the adult you. Even Nick, your response of saying, ouch, like that's so valid to have somebody say, ouch, that was a hurtful comment.
Yeah.
Yes, just the ouch.
Yeah. Yes.
You just came alongside 7-year-old me.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea, Eileen, that we experience kindness in the present moment by recognizing places we maybe have not experienced kindness in our pain, our wounding, the messages that we've believed about ourselves. And I think that's where a lot of this comes to the topic of our identity. Mm-hmm. Because when we're wallowing in shame or self-criticism, self-condemning behaviors and thoughts, it's often because we believe that's what we're worth, that's what we deserve. We're nothing, we've hurt people, we're worthless, we're no good. Well, those are all statements about our identity. And so I think if we can keep centered in our identity in Christ, who God has made us to be, as John Lynch says in a great video, that even on my worst day, I'm Christ in John Lynch, I'm Christ in Nick Stumbo, that's who I truly am, made in his image. I think of Ephesians 2:10. You mentioned our personal promises of that we are his masterpiece, created anew in Christ Jesus to do the good works he designed for us from long ago. Like that's who I am. And if that's who I am, then I'm, as our good friend Rodney Wright says on the podcast all the time, then I am worthy of love. Mm-hmm. I'm worthy of that kindness because that's my identity. And it actually gives me some freedom to acknowledge how deeply my actions, behaviors, and past has hurt people without compromising or changing my true identity. And so if we're willing to hold those two things in tension, my true identity in Christ and the pain I've caused, that's what I think leads to a lifestyle of change and transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. And realizing, talking about prophetic promises, Romans 8:11, the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells in me.
Amen.
It's not someone that's like it. It's the same one.
Amen.
And it'll give life.
Yeah.
It'll quicken, give life to our mortal bodies. So when we can access that part while not ignoring the other parts, because the more you ignore, you did this or you should defend yourself, it's just going to get bigger. So you acknowledge it. I hear you. And Jesus is here to protect us.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
It's the same spirit.
Amen. Well, Eileen, this has been so good. And as we wrap up today, I want to just ask if you have any final thoughts or words of encouragement as we think about how to avoid relapse by taking full responsibility for how we've wounded others. Any thoughts you want to leave listeners with today?
What's coming up for me is speaking to the struggling spouse. You are not your behaviors. Mm-hmm. You are more than that. That's just a part of your story. And as you can become curious about your story and be curious about the woundings, not just that you've caused, but that have wounded you, you'll start to experience more freedom, and those defense mechanisms will fall away. So just encouraging them to keep going, keep walking, be curious.
Yeah.
And kind.
Yes. Oh, be kind. Amen. I think for myself, like as I move in my journey, like even in my health, I still have unhealth. So even in my health, I can still hurt people. Like I can say the wrong thing to my wife. I can be short with my kids. And I think just that rupture and repair is coming to mind of like that is just naturally going to continue to happen. Mm-hmm. When I think of Ted's questions for you of like the addiction questions, how long has it been going on? have you tried to stop? Is it hurting people? Like, I'm an addict to saying dumb stuff. Like, I say dumb stuff all the time, but what does it look like to come back and to repair and to have those moments with the people that I love?
Yeah, so good. I'm thinking of John 1 as we wrap up that says Jesus came from the Father full of grace and truth. And it's not, as Andy Stanley, a pastor, says, it's not that he came 50-50 or chose one at sometimes and one at others. He was all grace and all truth all the time. And I think that's the spirit we're all trying to walk in, of I can live in the complete truth of what I've caused, choices I've made, ownership of that, and I can walk in complete grace for myself, for others, knowing who God made me to be, his love for me, and that those two things are not in conflict, though often I think they are. And if we can hold on to that, then I think we have the courage to stay present in pain, to stay present in those hard conversations, and to walk through this experience of taking full responsibility, because ultimately that is what changes us. So as we wrap up, we're reminded that taking full responsibility isn't about self-condemnation and shame. It's about honesty, humility, and repairing trust with those we've hurt. True ownership shows up in our words, our actions, and our attitudes, even amid our ongoing imperfections. So whether you're the one in recovery or supporting someone else, the goal is to balance healthy accountability with grace and avoid blame shifting or comparison. So Eileen, thank you for all the thoughts and wisdom and very personal, heartfelt stories that you've brought to our audience today. We appreciate you.
You bet. It was nice being here.
And if you're a fan of today's show, we would love it if you would subscribe, share it with somebody else, write us a review. You probably can think of someone right now that is in this battle of they're not taking responsibility, or maybe a spouse that's like, my husband won't take ownership. What do I do? These might be some words of encouragement they need today, and so take a moment and share it with them. If you want more information about Pure Desire's groups, resources, or counseling, you can find us at puredesire.org. Journey on, my friends. You are not alone.